This is 416 and a deep dive into sequence structure and in particular a fight scene. Now in the Zoom lecture I will of course go over the structure of the entire film, but I'm going to use this video as an opportunity to pull out the third segment and look at its own internal structure. The third sequence is the one where Max wakes up and has to fight Furiosa, then negotiates with her, then they get on the truck together, they go off, but the war boy gets back on. It's that sequence that comes right after the big storm sequence. And the sequence structure is actually quite well defined. It has 6 parts. It has plot points like a point of attack and culminations. And the larger pieces, the beginning, middle, and end of it, each have their own particular tensions. And if you remember, this is what we expect from our discussion of structure way earlier in the semester. We expect the larger story of the movie to break down into about 8 chapters or sequences, and that these individual chapters can themselves be broken up into a beginning, a middle, and an end with scenes and bits. We expect the sequence to begin with exposition, then come to rising action, and then come to some sort of resolution before transitioning to the next sequence. We expect the sequence to be built around scenes, the beginning of preparation, followed by the actual conflict of the sequence, and then the aftermath, along with the preparation for the next sequence. But before I dive in, let me put a fine point on it. A fight sequence or a fight scene must tell a story. The action, the stunts, the conflict of it tells a story according to the same principles that we've been talking about in larger stories. In particular, we're going to have 2 adversaries who want completely different things, and this puts them at odds. We also expect, especially in action movies, which are constructed sort of like a Swiss watch, that all the individual beats along the sequence, not just story points, but the individual beats within scenes are going to follow a so but structure as opposed to just one thing happening after another. Action movies, after all, are just the opposite of character-driven movies. They are built around a kind of cause and effect chain, not only on the level of story, not only on the level of sequence, but as we shall see in a second when I break down the fine points of a fight scene, every single shot by shot conforms to this, so then this, but this, so then this logical chain. In the actual fight scene, we're going to toggle back and forth between Furiosa being on top, then Max being on top, then Furiosa being on top, then Max being on top. And that back and forth movement between one outcome or the other, outcome A, outcome B, outcome A, outcome B, is what generates the constant tension, because just when you think one of them has won the fight, the other turns the tables. Notice also that this is a conflict between 2 characters whom we like. It is not just a good guy fighting a bad guy, and as a result, the tension is actually higher, because anytime one of the 2 of them is in jeopardy of dying, our heart leaps into our throat, and our hopes actually revolve around them finding some sort of common ground and working together. The fight scene in particular is built around not just a set of incidents, a set of attacks and defenses. It's built around provoking the audience to anticipate what's going to happen next. That's what keeps you on the edge of your seat. Not what is happening, but what you expect to happen in just 1 second. So that the typical elements of a fight scene, the props, the weapons, the circumstances, the stakes, and the physical layout are dealt with in terms of plant and payoff, revelation and recognition, advertising, a ticking clock, exposition, curiosity and reveal. All the terms that we've been learning actually apply directly to the best fight scenes. All right, let's get granular with this. After the epic and visually spectacular storm sequence, the next sequence opens up in complete stillness. We open on what seems to be a buried corpse, but Max raises his head, he's still alive, and he jumps up, but he has a hallucination. And this being the exposition part of the sequence, we have to be reminded of a few things, namely that Max has these hallucinations that can be distracting and overwhelming. The first thing he does is he pulls out the needle that has been taking his blood. A moment is spent to really take in the needle and the tube. This is important because that needle and tube will come back later. But, as with any story, he has a problem. And he does a lot of business with this key prop, the chain, because we have to understand that he is still connected to the war boy and the door. So he pulls off the door, and here in this expositional part of the sequence, certain props are going to be given certain emphasis, like the chain, but also the door. We see that it's heavy, that it's metal, that it is burdensome. He pulls out the war boy, who's also heavy. Max, whose want is now clear, he wants to get free of this chain, tries to take off the wristband, but he can't get it off. So he grabs the gun. He checks the ammo. This does two things. It emphasizes a key prop and a key element about this prop, its ammunition, and he prepares to shoot. Here's a case where the film, which is usually fast-paced, slows down to build our dread and anticipation of seeing a hand blown from its wrist. But the ammo is a dud, which is a surprise, and that emphasis is important because this is also a revelation. We know that the gun can't actually shoot bullets, and this will be important later. So then he tries to chew off the hand, showing just how desperate he is to get what he wants. But, and this is what I would call the inciting incident of the sequence structure, he hears a thudding off in the distance. He turns to see what it is, and he sees the truck in the distance. We have a reveal that gives us more exposition. It's Furiosa pounding out the dust in the radiator. Carburetor? I don't know, I'm not a car guy. And the important exposition that the key prop, her arm, is hanging on the side of the truck. This is important because Furiosa is going to be at a disadvantage. But be sure to notice in this sequence how information is skillfully withheld from the audience so that when it is finally revealed, it has greater impact. Once again, in order to build up anticipation, the tempo is slowed and there's a long, arduous walk for Max as he approaches the truck. And this is important because it also gives us a chance to recapitulate, to get a recap of all the different props, the gun, the chain, the war boy, and the door. And we hold on him because the next reveal is going to be big, so we want to build up the entrance of the war brides. Now, this is an important movie moment because the war brides have been withheld from us until this moment, so as they have the maximum impact here, especially in contrast to all the imagery we've seen before this, which is extremely toxically male. And suddenly we have this dreamlike vision of femininity and water. A key prop is emphasized here, the hose with the nozzle. It's also going to play a part in the fight scene. This marks the end of the first segment of the sequence. And with what we can call the point of attack of the sequence, we begin the next segment, which is all about the build up and anticipation for the fight scene that's about to occur. So Max kicks off this segment by throwing down the war boy and the door, and raising his weapon, he threatens them. His want is clear. He wants to survive, but more urgently, he wants to get free of this chain. At this point, the tempo freezes. Everyone just looks up in recognition, and there's a long moment of tension as everybody just stares. So Furiosa tosses away her weapon, and we get a moment to highlight a key prop, the bolt cutters, which just happen to be exactly what Max needs, and a bit of exposition. However, he also sees an even more urgent want, and he asks for it. Again, we stretch out time as Furiosa looks to the pregnant wife and gives her the go-ahead. The slow tempo allows us also to understand the layout of the space. Again, this is a table, and we're laying out all the pieces. As she walks over to him with the water, we get some key exposition that she's pregnant, in case you missed it in an earlier shot. Also, as she gives him the water, again, now the tempo has been turned down to a crawl, and we get a particular shot of Furiosa again and again that shows us that she is a ticking bomb, that she is looking for her opportunity. And also, again and again, we are given a shot where the view of her is blocked, making us, the audience, nervous about where she is, when she might jump and try to strike. To be clear, I'm arguing that this is a story point. These shots and being blocked from view and the emphasis on Furiosa getting ready to spring at any moment, because this is advertising for what might happen next, and so would be part of the screenplay. Max drinks, but that's not all he wants, and splashes the war boy, which is a bit of advertising. So he still has his primary want, which is to get free. So he demands that they cut the chain. So Furiosa readies to take it to him, but Max, knowing that she is trouble, demands that one of the other brides take it to him. And here is introduced the bigger ticking clock in this whole sequence. The bad guys are on their way towards them. So the tension, the blocked view, becomes intense, so that when we finally see that glimpse of movement, it is a jolt. And this essentially ends the first act, which has been placing all the elements, all the pieces of the chessboard exactly in place, so that the fight scene can unfold in a way that tells a story. So Furiosa tackles Max. Warboy is dragged, showing us again that they're physically connected. So she grabs the gun, and it seems like she wins. She puts it under his neck, but in a recognition, the gun is of course unloaded. So Max flips her, and it seems that Max has won. But the wives pull on the chain and drag him back. But the wives fall down, and Furiosa attacks with the bolt cutters, but he uses the door as a shield. And this is a kind of mini payoff, because the door has a context of a car door and then a context of just a piece of dead weight, but then it becomes, in the fight, a shield. So Max kicks her, but the Warboy starts to wake up. So when Furiosa lunges, Warboy trips her up with the chain. And again, this is another mini payoff, because the chain, which had been like a leash earlier and a burden, now has a completely different function as a tripwire. But Furiosa gets up and smashes the secret compartment and reveals the gun. So the Warboy tackles her, but Furiosa beats him down. So Max scares off the wives and rushes for the gun, and he gets there first. Again, it seems like Max has won, but he has one of his terrible flashbacks. So Furiosa pins him, and they fight for the gun. But the clip pops out, and the Warboy lunges, so Furiosa fires the bullet but misses, and Warboy gets the clip, but the wives tackle him. So Max flips and pins Furiosa, but the wives pull the Warboy and yank back Max. So the tripwire has now become a leash, so he falls, and so Furiosa jumps on him, and so Furiosa chokes him with the chain. Now the chain has yet another use or context. But Max pistol whips her, but Furiosa swipes him with the hose, and now the hose has a completely new function. It was just a source of life-giving water, and now it is a club. But Max flips her again, pins her, holding the gun. Warboy gives him the clip, so he fires off warning shots, and Max is the winner of this particular exchange. In the aftermath, we again see the bigger ticking clock, the approaching bad guys, the approaching war party, and this third segment of the sequence ends. Okay, I'm not going to go through the entire sequence shot by shot, but I'll go through the last 3 sections. The first culmination of the sequence is really when Max drives away in the truck. This is essentially a false victory for Max and a seeming resolution of the conflict between Max and Furiosa. However, the truck engine shuts off and there is a negotiation between Furiosa and Max, leading up to a final deal, and the wives get back on the truck, but so does the Warboy. But this essentially ends the middle part of the sequence, because the conflict between Furiosa and Max has been ultimately resolved in a kind of synthesis, although they don't trust each other yet. The next sequence is both aftermath and preparation. Aftermath from the conflict that has come before it, as Max and the women size each other up, but it is also preparation and advertising for the next sequence as they look through telescopes at the oncoming people eater, and preparation for the next coming sequence when they approach the canyon. The final sequence is about the Warboy's sabotage and Max finally getting the mask off and revealing himself as the Mad Max that we known from previous films. There's time for a little conflict and exposition, and ultimately the sequence ends when the Warboy is tossed off. Alright, I hope this gave you a sense of the structure of Sequence 3, its tensions, and the way it links up to other sequences in the movie. If you like this breakdown, watch my commentary of the entire film. I know it's kind of a lot, but hey, it distracts you from the election.